Hello, Dan here. Today I'm going to read a chapter from a wonderful book by Slavenka Drakulic called How We Survived Communism and Even Laughed, which is a memoir of living in Yugoslavia under communism. I'm going to read a chapter called A Communist Eye, or What Did I See in New York? Just how many iron curtains still exist? What are they made of? Sometimes it seems to me they are made of a material stronger than iron itself, our memories. It happened one night last summer in New York City. I was coming out of a train. There were not many people in the subway. As I approached the steps, I spotted a muffin lying there, a whole big brown muffin, nicely wrapped in plastic, in the middle of the steps. As if somebody dropped it in a hurry that very moment, and sooner than I could even think of it, I reached out my hand to pick it up. Or rather, my hand, my spine, my whole body bent toward it, without my knowledge or command. At that moment I was not hungry. In fact, I was just coming from a dinner, but I was not conscious of what I was doing. Halfway down I stopped. I didn't pick it up. I grabbed for the railing and stood there for a while, surprised at myself. Then a wave of nausea overwhelmed me. Why did I do that? What in the world was the reason to make such a move? Where did that come from? I went out onto the street, still thinking of the muffin on the steps. Right by the exit there was a blue trash can, and, as if the muffin had set something moving in me, I compulsively stopped in front of it. There were some newspapers, empty boxes, bottles and plastic glasses, but most of it was food. A half-eaten Chinese meal in a polystyrene box, even the plastic fork was there, an open bag of potato chips, a few apples, one could say they were rotten, but it depends what your standards are, part of a McDonald's hamburger, a piece of banana, a slice of pizza, all in just one trash can. I could not help myself, it fascinated me, all that food thrown away. I needed to remember where I was, and that, unless I was a beggar myself, I was looking at something called garbage. Not exactly food, at least not here. A block from the subway entrance there is a church. As I was passing by, I saw a man sleeping in the doorway with cardboard underneath him instead of sheets, a homeless person. Not that I hadn't seen him before, and many others too, and that they hadn't given me an uneasy feeling, only now I became someone more intensely aware of him. In 2 months I haven't got used to it. I thought as I passed him, I just can't. This is what all my American friends were telling me. You'll just get used to it, just wait and see. After a few days you won't even notice them. Homeless, beggars, underclass people. But every day that I spend here I become more and more conscious of them. As if walking down the New York streets, at some point I see only them and cannot take it any more. That woman, for example. She's sitting on the sidewalk in front of an antique shop on Lexington Avenue between 74th and 75th Streets. Perhaps she's my age, perhaps even younger, it's hard to tell. Dressed in black pants and a t-shirt, she would look ordinary if it weren't for her strange, worn-out face and tangled hair. Beside her there is a piece of paper saying "homeless" and a paper cup with coins. No explanation, nothing. Who would have time to read it anyway? Maybe she isn't really homeless, maybe she drinks or spends money on crack, but there she is, every day, begging. Or the young man in the subway, covered with a blanket. "I have AIDS," says his sign. Maybe he does. I assume he does. In the subway, a black man with a walking stick is shouting, "I'm a human being too!" Never before had I heard a person saying such a thing. Terrified at the fact that he actually had to shout it, being forced to witness his humiliation, I gave him money. It was the least I could do. Not much, a quarter, because when you come from Yugoslavia, or any Eastern European country, your money doesn't go very far. But it didn't help me to forget him. I wasn't able to buy my peace of mind. I lived with a friend on the Upper East Side. Even there, in that elite part of Manhattan, you met one beggar every 5 to 6 minutes, no matter if you walked or rode the subway. I tried to select people, for example, to give money only to women and invalids who are underprivileged even among the street population. I tried to play God, deciding who was more worthy of my few measly coins. But soon I gave up. It was not worth it. Perhaps God has more insight into their lives and destinies, but we human beings certainly don't. It's phony to make such choices, because there's no proof you're right. A woman might lie when she says she is homeless. She might give her money to her drunken husband, who beats her up. Then again she might not. But how am I to know? There are fake blind men. People even make a business out of it. But all in all, even if they lie, I doubt it's an easy job for any of them. For myself, I concluded, it's easier to give than not to give. It's easier to believe them. Then I don't have to fight my conscience, prove to myself that I don't need to give, which seems to be as hard as to make sure you gave money to the right person, because there are no right people. There, in New York, I learned to give. The poverty is so vast, one just can't keep one's eyes shut. At home it looks different. It involves another kind of dilemma. First of all, there are not so many beggars, though one becomes aware of the fact only when we can compare. Until a few years ago, the only beggars were gypsies, and they were treated as if their begging were normal, as if it were their real profession. The state gave up on civilising them long ago. It would have been too much trouble. But in the last 2 years, with the severe economic crisis, all of a sudden a different kind of beggar has come to light. There is an old man at the corner of Bakacheva Ulika, near the cathedral. Everyone calls him Professor. He comes on Saturday mornings, neatly dressed in an old-fashioned 3-piece suit, opens a folding stool and takes out his violin. Then he plays for an hour or so, and occasionally people give him money. "How are you today, Professor?" someone asks, and he replies, "Thank you, I'm very well for my age, you know." I heard he really is an ex-professor of music, over 80, and that his pension is too small to survive on. Then there is the woman who plays an accordion near the market. She doesn't exactly play it, rather she sits there running her fingers over the keys. The sound is not important, it's the work that counts, the attempt to make it appear to be work, not begging. It makes it easier for them, and for us. Most of them do get some money from the state, but not enough to survive on. They are not young, not homeless, mostly they are old ladies and handicapped people, the orphans of a socialist system giving way at the seams, falling apart. But it took us, citizens, some time to realise that they are begging and that there is nobody else to give to them anymore, except us. Caught between two sets of values, one where beggars are not allowed at all, and the other where beggars are the consequence of capitalism, we simply are not sure how to deal with them. There are institutions, but they don't function. Social workers give up because in spite of good programmes they have no funds. Judges give up because there actually is no other way for these people to survive, and they are relatively few. We hesitate because we are not supposed to see them. They are not supposed to be there. In the categories of socialist law there is no begging, only parasitism. In the categories of the socialist morality there is no charity. So if officially there are not beggars, officially there is no charity. And didn't they teach us at school that social parasitism is one of the worst evils of society? In capitalist countries it is simpler. Beggars are a sign of social injustice, class division, lack of social concern. The difference is that people there never even had the illusion we were brought up with, that they are all equal, and that in socialism the human being has the highest value of all. On the other hand, when more than half of the working population is living at the edge of poverty, it is only a miracle, no Westerner can understand it, that there are not more beggars. In a situation where socialist ideals were so obviously falling apart, with a decaying economy, and when poor people couldn't work even if they wanted to, because of an unemployment rate that topped 14%, to beg was quite simply moral. In New York I met my friend Evelina from Bulgaria. "Imagine," she told me, "only 6 months ago I would never, but never have thought that I'd see New York." Apart from the excitement of being out of the country for the first time though, she was depressed. One day when we were walking in the village she said, "Did you notice how many poor people there are? I just can't help looking at them. And even if I don't live here and don't have any personal connection with them, I feel guilty all the time." This was it. We were seeing the same thing, but why? Why did we, as it seems, notice only the poor people, the garbage cans full of food, the litter and the dirt? Did someone promise us something else? And if so, who? I I think it comes from the movies and TV, Evelina said. This is how we first learned about the States, through pictures, but beautiful, clean pictures. There was no dirt in them, and no real poverty without a happy ending. We made the mistake of taking them for real. Have you ever noticed how the colours in movies are so very different? So much brighter than in reality? I guess I'm just disappointed that the product, life, doesn't correspond to the advertisements we've seen. Perhaps we should file a complaint with President Bush. What do you think? Said Evelina, laughing at this very American idea of filing a complaint. Not only the colours, but the people look different too. In TV ads especially, I could watch them for hours, like a long soap opera from another planet. Yet on the street you don't see them, these polished, shining, smiling, perfect people. They are nowhere. And what you do see is much more average and much more scary. So, yes, we are bound to be disappointed because we can't make a clear distinction between the picture and the reality, and because it is the promise that counts, the illusion that somewhere out there they do exist, only we don't see them. Then again, maybe we just can't see them. Maybe we have a certain kind of inborn blindness. There has to be more to it. There has to be another reason why we, Evelina and I, notice only certain things and certain people. There is a deeper reason why the poverty sticks to us, why we recognise beggars, homeless people, bums, petty thieves, drunks, the sick, junkies, why we take it all so personally, why it hurts us. It's because we have a communist eye, like a third spiritual eye placed in the middle of one's forehead. This eye scans only for a certain type of phenomenon. It is selective for injustice. Even if the socialist states have fallen apart, the ideals of equality and justice haven't. They are still with us, built in like a chip. We remember them from school, from our movies, from literature glorifying the idea of justice, as well as from the clean, beggarless streets of our cities. Ina, my friend from East Germany, told me that on her very first shopping trip to West Berlin, she took her kids, 12-year-old Erna and 9-year-old Peter. With them it was an arduous, emotional experience. Of course, they were fascinated with the toys, the food, the clothes. Who wouldn't be, she said. But as soon as we started walking down the Kurfürstendamm, especially near the famous zoo subway stop, I could see their consternation. They had never seen so many people begging, drunk, lost, or just sick, obviously needing help. They asked me why. What was I supposed to tell them? That the state that just collapsed wasn't so bad after all? Now Ina's kids and she herself have to get used to it, but I and she too suspect it won't go very quickly and without consequences. One doesn't lose one's third communist eye that easily. Evelina and I see New York as Erna and Peter see West Berlin, with the memory of our cities still inside us. We have no other yardstick, no other way to see it, but against the situation we came from. That's why it's absurd to tell us that we should forget. Maybe there is nothing to forget. Maybe this is something that we care to preserve, the idea of justice from the other world that we brought with us. We don't know yet. We need time to decide. Transplanted to the United States, we carry that idea and much more with us, like excess baggage that perhaps we would like to drop off or leave at the entrance to this other promised world. But even to look at the richness of a consumer society becomes difficult. We are not used to that either. At Bloomingdale's, after an hour of touring the store, Evelina stops for a moment, as if she is gasping for air. "I'm tired," she says. "My head is spinning and my eyes hurt. There's so much light here." Even though this is not my first visit, I feel exhausted in the same way. After a certain point my eyes refuse to look. My mouth becomes dry and I start to have a headache. I recognise this particular tiredness, hers and mine. The feeling that it's just absurd to look at so many things, and so many kinds of one thing, as if one is enclosed in a room with mirrored walls that endlessly reflect each other. It has to stop somewhere, you think. This multiplying, this plenitude. It doesn't make any sense. Coming from the world of shortages, one's idea of plenty is mainly of fruit, meat, vegetables, of shampoo, soap, or toilet paper. Here you are murdered by variations on each of these and by the impossibility of distinguishing the differences. First you discover an immense greed, a kind of fever, a wish to buy everything, the primordial hunger of consumerism. Then you discover powerlessness and the very essence of it, poverty. Moreover, you start to realise that Bloomingdale's, for you, is a museum, not a real store where you can buy real things for your real self. In socialism, we were not used to thinking of ourselves as poor. The communist principle of ravnilikova, levelling, made us all live more or less under the same conditions. There were no ways, no means, not enough goods to establish a real, visible, palpable class distinction between poor and rich. To be rich was an exception from the general rule. The good thing was that we were all poor. The bad thing was that we didn't know it. This is what the Iron Curtain is made of, many facets of a different reality, of different ideals and meanings we were brought up with and truly believed in. The Iron Curtain is hidden in the feeling Evelina and I have as we walk down Fifth Avenue, knowing we are here and at the same time are not here because this reality has another meaning for us. In the middle of New York we are enclosed by a different reality principle. It's good to come here and see. For a prisoner it is worth it for the sake of travelling itself, but it becomes clear that the instant translation into another culture, into another way of life and values, and that is what people in Eastern Europe expect to happen, is impossible. The Iron Curtains will stay with us for a very long time, in our memories, in our lives that we cannot renounce, no matter how difficult they were and how hard we try.